Are you ready for career success? Your Career Podcast will help you to take control of your career. Now, would you like to take my 2-minute career success quiz to see if you're really ready for career success? You'll get your results, analysis, and recommendations for improvement immediately. Go to janejacksoncoach.com and take the quiz today. The link is in my show notes. Now, on with the show. Welcome to episode 249 of Your Career Podcast. Lara Quie's superpower is the power of connection. She connects with people very quickly and helps to connect them with whom they need to be connected. As head of business development for Asia Pacific for Barristers Chambers 20 Essex in Singapore, Lara helps disputes lawyers find the very best barristers and arbitrators for their cases. She's also a business development consultant and executive coach for lawyers, leaders, and founders at Lara Q Associates, helping high performers achieve more success and greater happiness. She focuses on managing partners, in-house lawyers, and C-suite executives, and those not quite ready for retirement, lawyers who want to build their practice, and people who want to reinvent themselves. Podcasting is also her passion, and Lara hosts the Legal Genie Podcast. In her spare time, she runs a unique handmade gifts and fabric company called Lara Q Designs and enjoys spending time with her 3 daughters, 2 Dachshunds, Black Rabbit, and long-suffering husband. Lara is Eurasian, Japanese, and British, and has lived in Hong Kong and Singapore and spent long periods of time in Spain, Germany, Belgium, and France. Now, with this varied background and multiple interests, I found that we have a lot in common. I'm Eurasian and I'm English Chinese and have also lived around the world. And so I thoroughly enjoyed interviewing Lara on Your Career Podcast. And so let's hear her journey across the globe. And let's welcome Lara Quie to the show. Hello, Lara.
Hello, Jane. It's great to be on your show. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, I'm very excited because when we met during a webinar several weeks ago and then we connected on LinkedIn, I realized we've actually got so much in common because we share a common cultural background as well as growing up a little bit like an expat kid as well. And you're now in Singapore, I'm in Sydney, and I spent 18 years in Singapore, which I love. So who better to get on the podcast than you, because you've had some interesting career transitions. You're a lawyer, you run your own business now as well, and you've got a side project that's really interesting and creative. So I'd love to hear all about it. But to kick us off, as I always do, tell me, Lara, what were your early aspirations for your career when you were a little girl?
I think that when I was first aware of the fact that other people had careers, I was very interested in being a nurse. I thought that the caring profession was the way forward, looking after people. But then at the age of 6, I became a teacher for the first time. The headmaster's son was very challenged with his reading, and I suddenly snapped into reading and I thought it was very easy. So I would go over on play dates to his house and help him to read. I think my calling as a teacher came quite early. Mm-hmm. And then at the age of 14, that was the moment that I decided I wanted to be a lawyer. So actually, I decided to be a lawyer quite early, and I did eventually achieve that goal.
Well, I'm very impressed at the age of 6, you already launched a career. So that's a first on Your Career Podcast. But obviously you've got a talent for communication and educating and supporting people. So that augurs very well for what you do now. So at the age of 14, what made you decide that you wanted to be a lawyer?
So my mother was an investment banker in the City of London. And she did a lot of transactions that involved lawyers. So she would tell me about them, and she was using a firm called Linklaters. And in those days, which is very many years ago, you were able to ask a favor of other people that you knew. And she happened to say, my daughter needs work experience. Any chance she could come and sit in your office for a couple of weeks? And very kindly, this very nice lawyer, Andrew Roberts, he said, of course, Lara, you can come and sit with us for 2 weeks. And so I got my first work experience straight in at Linklater's Magic Circle. So that was the start, and experiencing that, enjoying that very professional environment, lots of people beavering away, all of the sharp suits and power lunches. I thought, this is the career for me. So that was the inspiration.
The power lunches and the suits. My goodness. So that sucked you in, Lara, didn't it? How interesting. But it just goes to show how having work experience is so valuable, because you could be in an environment that really inspires you, or you could be in an environment that you think, okay, well, that was interesting, but it's not quite for me. But for you, knowing what it was like day to day, and not only the job function, but also just the feel and the culture of a place, you realize this could be where you could fit. Yes. So how did your career progress from there?
Well, so I think that really gave me a taste of things, and I did other internships after that, all in solicitors' firms. I was quite set on it. I was told I was good at English and languages, so I knew that I was very arts focused, that science and numbers were not in my future. So that was very clear. I think that in those days, it's still very traditional. I have a Japanese mother. And so the tiger mum in her said, well, lawyer, banker, doctor. And a doctor was definitely not there, as I said, with my lack of science, banker as well. So lawyer was the only other one available in that mindset, I think. And, it's a prestigious, high status profession. It's something that people aspire to. And because of that, if you are academic and you happen to be able to achieve the grades, you do it. And I think, I was just sort of carried along. It didn't really occur to me that I could do anything else. And so I did languages at A-level. And I knew at that stage already that doing languages would give me something to stand out from the crowd, and that I would do languages at and then go to law school after that. So my path from the age of 16, pretty much from when I chose my A-levels, was totally planned and set. And I had already, and I don't really know how I had realized that this strategy, but I think it was more about the sign of the time. And so in those days, it was all about the reunification of Germany, about Europe being a powerhouse. The UK was in a very different time. I mean, we're speaking in post-Brexit times now, but certainly in the 1990s, it was all about France, Germany, Italy, Spain, all of those countries, and how the UK could do business with them. So it made sense to me that if I focused on French and German and linguistics at university, I could bring a lot of languages to the table, and that these international law firms had told me quite specifically, when it comes to lawyers, we're looking for people who bring something else. And so I thought, well, if I go and do law at university, I'm only bringing law. And actually, I'm quite academic, but I'm not outstanding. I don't think I would get a first in law, which would mean then no one would choose me unless I bring something. But if I do a 4-year degree, I would get 1 year abroad. And I really liked the idea of spending a year overseas and with other students and learning a language more in depth. And so when I had my year abroad, that again gave me a more international perspective, a feeling of independence. And I think that by the time the training contract application time came round, I was in a position to say, well, I've lived abroad and I bring you these languages and, I've done all of these training experiences, work experience. I had such a brilliant CV compared to my peers because of the opportunities that I had been lucky to have. And so I was very lucky to get a training contract with they're now called Dentons, but it was called Wild Sapt in those days. And it was a boutique finance and banking law firm, because that was, my mother was a banker. So I thought, oh yes, banking and finance, that's the way forward. And in those days, they were very much the elite boutique for that. They paid the highest rates when you went to law school, and they sponsored me for my entire 2 years. And then I did my training contract, my 2-year training contract with them after that.
How interesting, because first of all, the parental influence as well, which has been really positive for your career. And, having a tiger mum, being half Chinese myself, I understand that. But how good that, you have parents who were really invested in your career and your future and success as well. But a very smart move to think you needed something unique and different from other highly qualified lawyers as well, in order to really get your foot on the ladder. And having the multiple languages, it makes such a difference, doesn't it? And I think probably what must have really set you apart was your forward thinking and your attitude towards what else can I bring to the table? I need to really be able to sell without overtly selling, yes, which is the best thing when you're thinking about landing a new job or landing a different job as well. And so you moved into finance and banking, and then over time in your career, was there a specific aspect of law that you wanted to focus on more than another?
Yes. So having got that training contract at a banking and finance firm, when I went to law school, I discovered international European law, and because that was part of the curriculum. And that was the bit I really enjoyed and excelled in. And a lot of that was around the mindset that European law is supreme. And of course, British people really couldn't accept that, as we've seen in Brexit. But I got that. I understood the different hierarchies of law, and I was quite willing to accept that there could be, an overarching supreme level of law that is sort of supranational. And that, understanding what regulations and directives and different things are like coming from the European Commission, etc. And so it really made a lot of sense to me. And then it tied in with my languages as well. So I thought, wow, European law, this is so interesting. And I got a real boost because exams, and I got some sort of distinction in it, which meant that I was invited to sort of an exclusive event with various rather high-profile individuals in international law that were invited to the College of Law in Guildford. And I thought, wow, I seem to be quite good at this area. How interesting. And I think you're naturally drawn to things that you're good at. And it made sense with my international connections and interests. And so we haven't mentioned, but I actually grew up in Spain. And so I've always been surrounded by international people, and I've always had an interest in languages. And having had exposure to languages from a very young age, I think, they come very easily to me. My ears are attuned to listen out for different accents, to be interested in other languages, etc. So that whole European law thing really appealed. And so when I started my training contract at Wild Sapt, they didn't have a European competition law department at all. So I did seats in asset finance, in general banking, in property law, and in reinsurance litigation. But when it came to qualifying, so after 2 years, you get a job offer. So I was offered a job in asset finance. I think I was also offered one in acquisition finance. But by then, I was so excited about European law. And in year 2000, Wild Sapt merged with another firm called Denton Hall. And that's when it became Denton Wild Sapt. And Denton Hall had a fantastic competition law department. So on qualification, I said, hey, you guys have got a competition law department. I'm really keen on it. Could I come and join? And they said, well, at the moment, this is ring fence for Denton Hall qualifiers. We can't take you in at the moment, but why don't you come back in 6 months' time and we'll see. So what I did was I went to the European Commission and I did a training. It's called a stage. It's a 6-month training provision that they offer there. More than, say, it's an astronomical number of people apply, like 10,000 people apply for, I don't know, sort of 1,000 places or something. Anyway, I did all this lobbying to MPs. I did all of this stuff to get this position. In the end, I was actually offered 6 different offers, which was crazy, from different departments that wanted me. I had no idea why, but it turned out that, you know, other Brits were not interested in the European Commission at the time. So when I showed keenness, of course, they were quite keen back. Not that I realized that, but anyway, so I joined the Directorate General, so DG Competition, in Brussels. And I went there from October till March, and I was already a fully qualified lawyer by then. So you can imagine that they thought that was pretty useful, and of course with my language skills, etc. So I did some very interesting cases. I was in Unit F1, which was Capital and Consumer Goods, under the director Finn Lomholt. And it was just fascinating, the kind of work that they were doing. And I was involved in the first merger that was outsourced from the merger unit. So within the competition directorate, there was a special division for mergers, but they had sort of decentralized that so that it actually trickled down into the dedicated units. So we were capital and consumer goods. And so we got the very first merger case involving phlebology, which is plasters and casts and medical devices relating to healing of wounds. So that was a Smith and Nephew and Beiersdorf merger. So I think it was Smith and Nephew requiring a Beiersdorf entity. And because Smith and Nephew already had a lot of bandages and plaster making manufacturing facilities, we had to analyze the effect on competition of the merger of those two entities in that particular business. So really fascinating. Learned a lot about plasters and casts and things like that. But it really got me excited about that. And then when I came back to the UK, I wasn't able to actually get a job at Denton World Saps. They didn't have room for me after all that, despite the great experience and insight I could then bring to the table. But another firm took me on. They were called Taylor Joynson Garrett, but they became Taylor Vessing. So they merged as well when I was there. So that was the second firm that merged while I was there. Yes.
What an interesting story. And, you know, throughout the whole story, your attitude and willingness to really go the extra mile to get to where you want to be shines through. You know, you were lobbying MPs, you found out all that you could, you expressed, you know, so much enthusiasm. I think that really is a good lesson for anyone who wants to target somewhere specific in their career. And I learned something new from you today, Lara. Phlebology. Who would have thought? That sounds like now, how am I going to work the word phlebology into my normal conversation?
I don't think I've used the word phlebology since year 2000, actually.
well, maybe when my grandsons need a plaster, I can somehow say something about it and they'll go, "What are you talking about, Pawpaw?"
I know. Very specific, but a very interesting case. And I did some other really interesting cases. But I was really proud of that one because there were, I think, 3 of us who were working on this first merger clearance because it was so novel. And we actually got to go and meet the god himself, Mario Monti, who was the head of the European Commission. And we went into this special lift that went into his incredible office. I mean, it's a bit like, you know, that sort of James Bond You go into some huge masterminds type of office. I imagine Elon Musk probably has that sort of thing. But, the fact that the commissioner, the director of the unit, got so excited and kept telling me how this was such an honor and this is such a big deal. And I thought, right, well, I'm only a stagiaire, like a trainee, and I'm already going up to meet the actual head of the European Commission. So I thought, wow, going up in the world, right, this is the way to start. And obviously looked pretty good on my CV. So yes, I'm a big believer in really strategizing about, as you say, where do I want to get to? What's going to get me there? What's going to make me stand out? I'm never shy of doing the extra work. I'm never shy of thinking about who can help me get somewhere. So I'm very interested in, building the right relationships that will help me gain either the knowledge or someone who can, mentor me into something, or who can, possibly even, in those days, let's say, but pull strings it is who and it was, it is very much more transparent these days. And I must applaud that. It's very, very important that meritocracy is there. But in those days, it really was a thing. Who do you know? Because the internet, email, and the World Wide Web, it wasn't what it is today. You couldn't just connect with someone on LinkedIn. It wasn't like that. It really was, who did you know in person? So you had to make sure that you were not shy about getting around and making yourself known, etc.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And we've always said for so many years, it's 6 degrees of separation to get to a target person that you'd like to speak with. But these days, it's really only maybe 2, max 3 degrees of separation because of the ease of everything being online. But I think that's something that has been lost a little bit these days, because back in the day, and I started my career way back in the early 1980s, there was nothing online. It was everything to do with getting to know someone, getting them to get to know you. Well, first of all, be aware that you exist, then to get to know you, get to like you and trust you so much that they realize that you actually can deliver. And then you would gain really strong referrals and recommendations. And it would make such a difference if you could develop those really strong relationships, but also make an impact when people meet you. And I think with your skills and experience and amazing attitude, and also I sense this lack of fear. It's like, let's give it a go. That's what's coming through really strongly from you, is that this attitude of let's give it a try. And if I work really hard at it and I do the right things, I can get there, which I think is really inspiring. And so now I know that you have lived and worked and traveled to many different countries. And so from Europe and from the UK, how did the rest of your career progress?
So, as I mentioned, I got that job with Taylor Vessing, and then I moved to another firm, DLA Piper. Well, which merged with Piper while I was there. We can see a pattern. Yes. So no firm wants to take me if they don't want to merge, because it'll happen. But no, those were the days when all of the big firms were trying to globalize. So I was at DLA. I was doing European competition law. It was all moving forward. It was a very exciting time. Things were very, very new and exciting. But all sorts of things happened there. And I realized that actually law wasn't for me. A very, very stressful, long hours culture, a lot of pressure. There were some very unfortunate incidents that happened. And I just realized, you know what, this isn't what I thought it was. But I've been here and I've tried that. And I've realized that actually my personality and the kind of work and the hours, and also just my my physical makeup, I'm not somebody who can work till 3 a.m. every day. I can't. Just my body gives up. And so mainly for sort of health reasons and mental health reasons, I decided that actually I would retrain as a Montessori nursery school teacher. So I quit the law. And I was already married by then, and we were focused on starting a family. So we decided that rather than be a lawyer who has to, hire a nanny for her children, I decided to retrain as a Montessori nursery school teacher and work with young children and get the sort of education that would help me be a better mother for my children. And so that's what I did. But then again, because I think I'm just not, my body is just not that resilient. And so I kept catching horrible colds from all of these children. So these, these snotty-nosed, tiny toddlers bringing these horrible germs in. And I was ill so much. And, so I think I realized, wow, this is going to be tough for me to be a nursery school teacher. And in the meantime, a fellow lawyer at DLA, she had got this beautiful kitchen from Sweden. So she's Swedish, and she'd brought a kitchen from her hometown and installed it. And I thought this was the most fabulous kitchen I'd ever seen. So we had a kitchen we were living on the King's Road in Chelsea, and we had this very awkward shaped kitchen, and it also had a boiler in it and all sorts of funny cabinetry. So I got her kitchen contacts to come to the UK and fit this fabulous tailor-made bespoke kitchen that covered all those horrible boilers, that made everything look fabulous, made the most of the space. And I thought, this is just the most incredible thing. And then we moved house. We sold that property and we moved to Wimbledon, and we did a side return, which is an extension of the back of the house, to create a very large kitchen, living room, dining, open plan space. And so we got that kitchen company to do another fabulous kitchen for us there, which I did actually design by myself. And then having done, those two kitchens, and then together with my former colleague Sophia, we said, you know what, we could actually start a business with this, because everyone kept saying to us, this kitchen is incredible. Where did you get this kitchen? And so we built a Swedish chalet in my garden, and we opened a Swedish kitchen company. And how did we do that? Well, we went to that manufacturer in Sweden and we said, hey, do you want us to be your exclusive distributors for the UK? And this is us with our competition knowledge, because we say, you're exclusive distributor. So give us the territory of the United Kingdom. And they said, oh, yes, that would be great. We'd love to expand the business. They were a very small family-owned business. But what we realized was that in the same town, there was this very high-end kitchen company called Lidhults, which is like the small bone of Sweden. And we thought, look, this would be great. We could have high-end and sort of mid-range as well, so that we cater for two different budgets and, different types of markets. And then we can offer a wider range, because the medium price ones were a lot more modern, lots of spray painted, lacquered kind of modern Italian style kitchens, whereas the bespoke kitchens were more shaker style or solid wood. And we thought, the two different offerings could appeal. So we went to them and we did a whole PowerPoint presentation, because we've been lawyers, we're like, oh, this is how you do things. And we brought, a level of professionalism that I think these kitchen guys had never seen before, because again, they're out in the middle of nowhere in a very small village in Sweden, and they see these two, lawyers come to them and go, we could be your exclusive distributors in the UK. And I think they were a bit taken aback, but we said, but this other kitchen company, we were already representing them. Do you want to get in on this? So they went, oh, okay, yes, please. And that is how we opened, and we designed the brochures ourselves. We had all the photos taken. We learned about the software. So we had to learn the CAD software. And actually everything was in Swedish. So I had been luckily exposed to Swedish when I was a child in Spain. A lot of my friends are Swedish, so I had picked up some conversational level. I wouldn't say that I'm fluent at all. However, when it comes to learning all the names for drawers and a fridge and all of that, it was no problem for me as a linguist. And so I learned how to use CAD in Swedish and how to do all the kitchen orders. And that's how we started a business. And I was in that for 4.5 years. And we took it to the high street. And then my husband, who I had met as a trainee at WildSat, he then got an offer to join a firm in Hong Kong. So we both said, wow, what a great opportunity to move to Asia. We are both Eurasians. He is same as you, Hong Kong, Chinese, English mix. And I thought this is such a great opportunity to try a different lifestyle. By then we had 2 young children and I thought, yeah, let's do it. So I sold my half of the business to Sophia, and she has taken that business to extremes. She has been absolutely amazing with it. It's called Solar Kitchens, which stands for Sophia Lara, Sophia Lara Kitchens. She's got 3 showrooms. Please do check out her kitchens if you're in the UK or in the rest of Europe. So solarkitchens.com. Free plug for Sophia. You've done an amazing job with the business. We moved to Hong Kong, and that's when, we were there for 3 years. And I was suddenly thinking, oh my goodness, I've given up that business, having been an entrepreneur, having been a lawyer, having been a Montessori teacher, and heading towards my 40s, and had a very good education. I went to Oxford University and all of those kind of things. I suddenly thought, what kind of example am I setting to my daughters if I don't work? And I started to think, well, what job could I do? That typical, stay-at-home mum attitude where you think, I don't know anything, my CV's rubbish, I don't know what to do. And I spoke to my neighbour, and she said, oh, this friend of mine, you should speak to my friend because she's working in business development and marketing at a law firm, and you were a lawyer, weren't you? I said, yes. Could I meet her and find out more? So I found out more about this job. It sounded very interesting. And I went to a recruiter. So she gave me the name of a recruitment consultant. I went along and they said, no, very difficult, very difficult. You're really a square peg trying to fit into a round hole, aren't you? And I thought, wow. So the fact that I was a lawyer, that doesn't wash. It's not an advantage to doing business development in a law firm. Wow. So I was pretty surprised, very, very disheartened, thinking like, okay, well, never mind. I'll try something else then. But I went back to this friend, Jane, and she said, oh, that's ridiculous. Okay, let me put you in touch with someone else. So then I met this other recruiter and she said, oh, let me speak to this person that I know quite well. They've been looking for a very long time to find the right person for their role. I'll see if I can get you an interview. So I went along to that. I got on very well with that person. I met a lot of different people there. And what we agreed, since it wasn't, I was a bit out of the box, we just said, look, why don't we give it a 6-month contract so that, very low risk on both sides. I can see how I go. I'm not really bringing relevant experience to the table, but I'm a fast learner. Let's see how we get along. And so that was with Winston and Strawn, and that was a really great role. I enjoyed myself very much. I did my full 6 months. I learned on the job. And I actually stayed 7 months because Jonathan, my husband, he got transferred to Singapore. So I was offered a permanent role, but actually only stayed 7 months, and then we moved to Singapore. So Yeah.
Another interesting journey from Montessori teacher, which, by the way, I was as well many years ago. This is when we spoke before this podcast, we realized there are all these synergies, and it's like a similar path, although not in law for me. But so from there to setting up your own business with a friend, Solar Kitchens. Okay, so remember that, everybody. That sounds fascinating. It must have been such an interesting time with all the design, and that tapped into your creative side as well as your business side and your legal mind, yes? And then upping root with a young family and going to a new country again. But it wouldn't have been too huge a cultural shock being part Asian, part Western yourself, and of course with your husband being half Chinese English like me. Moving to Hong Kong would have been a really interesting and exciting time. And at that time in Hong Kong, it would have been just wonderful to be there. But you mentioned the recruiter who was negative about you going for a role that didn't tick every box. And I think the important thing to remember is that don't take one person's opinion at face value, because it could be completely wrong. And all that recruiter didn't do was get to know your personality, your attitude, your adaptability, and all of those additional skills that you were bringing to a particular role. So thank goodness the second recruiter was able to think out of the box and actually see you as an individual and what you could bring to the table, and the excellent communication that you bring as well. And, you know, when it comes to business development, to have someone understand the industry, then to go in, even though it's a slightly different role, it's not such a big change that it's impossible. So I'm glad that you did have that opportunity, but then you're whisked away to Singapore. And so how did things go in Singapore? One of my favorite countries, of course.
Yes, so we were in Hong Kong for 3 years. And then Jonathan got transferred to Singapore. And luckily, I was able to get a job because by then, as you say, I could tick all the boxes. There are very specific job requirements for business development and marketing professionals. It's a role that has very specific criteria. And if you can't tick those boxes, then it's hard, you know, which of course in my very first foray into this area, I did not tick any box at all, I think probably. But having had that one role, even just literally 7 months, I could tick all the boxes. So from then on, you know, I would say to anyone who's venturing into a new career area, you know, look at all of those different job descriptions, start to notice which are the criteria, you know, those boxes you need to tick, and how can you get those skills under your belt so that the next role you go for, it's easy, bam, 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 you've got all of those. So I recognized that quite early, realized which areas I needed to work on so that I could tick those boxes. And so my second role was very easy to get. And then over the years, because we're just celebrating our 8th year in Singapore, I worked at various firms, but it has been a very interesting progression within business development and marketing, because I think I first started out as a very traditional marketer, you know, learning all the ropes about communication, press releases, PR, editorial, learning about directory submissions for legal, etc. But I also began to leverage my unique skills, which was the fact that I had been a lawyer. So what was it that made me stand out from the other BD professionals? It was the fact that I could communicate on a peer-to-peer level with other lawyers. And it meant that I was able to grow trust with them and the level of insight that enabled me to serve them much, because I knew what it was like to sit on their side of the table, and I understood the pressures of, you know, the billable hour, making sure that my time sheet was filled every single day, making sure that my clients felt that I was always available, and then knowing about the importance of establishing your own personal brand and reputation, growing your network, doing business development. And because I had that level of empathy and insight, it meant that I really could give them the kind of insights that they really wanted. And it also meant that because I had that level of trust, lawyers are very highly skeptical people. It's their job to look for risk and to identify the areas which are going to need to be de-risked. And for that reason, you always have to provide evidence that something will work. So they will always question anything you bring to them. So I might say, well, why don't we do a round table? We'll get in some people and you can give a talk about, employment law in China, for example. And they'll go, well, I don't know if these kind of things work, And so you'd have to go, well, actually, let me tell you they do work because I did this event, blah, blah, blah. And this person got this piece of work exactly because of that. The return on investment is there. And so then they'll go, oh, really? And then I'll say, yes, why don't you speak to that lawyer? Look, let me put you in touch. Let's talk about it. And then they'll go, oh, okay. Then they relax because they go, the evidence is there. Okay, I'll give it a shot. So I think understanding that need for evidence and understanding their thinking process and the way that they look at the world is very important. And you have to really speak their language and you be able to communicate to that, then, that you're really doing something that's in their interests. And so because of that, I began to realize that I could also do that with clients, that I could attend events. And this comes to my interest in everything. So I'm always wanting to learn. And so when I noticed that there are so many seminars at different companies and different law firms and all sorts going on about different areas of law or different areas of change, regulatory change or anything happening in Singapore, I thought, look, I'll just go along to those. And of course, then I'm there and then I start networking. So I start to speak to in-house counsel. So, what's going on with your company? Oh, really? You're acquiring a business center in Vietnam. We have an office in Vietnam. Do you already, have lawyers lined up? Would it be of interest if I connected you to the head of our Vietnam office? Oh, yes, that would be very helpful. I was thinking, oh, okay, great. So what I began to do is realize and connect the dots that, the more people I knew, the more likely it was that I might bring some bit of business into the law firm. And I was lucky that the leadership at that firm was very supportive of me because they recognized, look, she's a lawyer. She knows about law generally. She can go out there and actually talk about these things. And so they were quite happy for me to do that. And then once I started bringing in business, of course, they really liked that because what made sense about that was the fact that when you've got an individual lawyer out there selling themselves and their practice, of course, they're focused on that area. So if you're an M&A lawyer, so mergers and acquisitions, you're thinking about mergers and acquisitions, right? And when you speak to someone, you're saying, so, is your business interested in merging in another? Or are you thinking of acquiring a new business? Or, that's that kind of interest. Whereas in my position, I was interested in the entire firm, not just the office I was sitting in Singapore, but all our global offices. So the moment somebody mentioned, oh, we're doing something in another place, like, oh, in Taiwan, or, oh, we're expanding to the United States, or any of these things, I would then think, oh, right, how can I solve this problem? So constantly thinking of all the keywords that they would mention and what does that keyword mean for me and the people in my business, in the firm. And so because of that, it meant that we brought in many, many opportunities. And it also meant that I understood what was going on for businesses, that my network was big enough that when we wanted to organize events, I knew people that I could bring in as speakers. I could get collaboration opportunities, etc. So it really began to become evident to me that growing a professional network was very, very important.
And the passion that you have for it really comes through. What's interesting is that so often when someone gets a business development or sales professional on their team, they don't match up with the delivery team, the people who are actually doing the work. And so sales are off selling and trying to grow the business. And very often they sell something that delivery might say, that's not what we do. it doesn't quite match up. So the beauty of what you bring to the table is that with your extensive experience within law and your understanding of international law and having traveled to all of these different places and understand the cultural nuances too, bringing that as a business development professional and legal mind is very valuable for your business. Now, I'm interested to know, because this is full on and there's a lot going on and you've got lots of energy, but you've also said that physically you get a little bit exhausted because being, like super mum or, being everything to everyone is really challenging. You also are now a coach too, 1 day a week, and the rest of the week you're working, plus you're a mum, plus you're a loving mother and a good daughter. How do you balance everything and not burn out?
I think everyone is very conscious of this concept of burnout. I don't think it was something that we really recognized or talked about very much before. But we would see people that it would happen to along the way. But it was never really never talked about in a way that I think the pandemic really brought these things into sharp focus. So yes, I've always been very conscious of the need to protect my energy. And especially because, as you say, I'm a very high energy person. I'm not an introvert. I'm definitely an ambivert, but I began to understand that introverts, for them, the problem is that other people sap their energy and they therefore need to crawl into a cave and recharge. I'm not like that. I get energy from other people. So I do need other people. I get de-energized if I'm on my own. But at the same time, I am so high energy and so enthusiastic and always go overboard that I do exhaust myself very easily. And my mother always says to me, "Oh, Lara, you've overdone it again, haven't you?" So I'm on, I'm always sort of full blast. I can probably go, for 8 weeks, just like, 8-week terms that I used to have at university. But after that, I collapse in a heap. I get terribly ill and then I get the flu or something horrible. I have to spend about 3 days in bed. So I'm like that. But yes, it is hard to juggle so many things. And I think that because of the nature of, my personality and the way that I do overdo things, I did unfortunately get breast cancer because my immunity was so low. I suffered from very low immunity, I think, because of just overdoing things, really, traveling overseas quite a lot, pushing myself I think because my role was very, very responsible, I often felt like I had to be there. And there were a lot of times when I knew if I listened to my body was telling me, "Lara, you should not be getting up this morning and going into work and hosting that entire event. You actually need to stay in bed." But I always thought, I'm irreplaceable. No, actually, Lara, you have to be there. You can't let people down. And I just pushed myself through that too many times, and eventually the cancer got me. So it was during my chemotherapy that I came across the concept of being able to learn about coaching through virtual means. I had never heard of Zoom before, but there was a coaching course on Zoom. I was able to do it from my home virtually. And with my wig on, I had chemo that made me very, very ill. I had very good and very bad days. But having a distraction, learning something new at a point where I was, so right in the beginning, it was very touch and go. I really honestly was at a phase where I didn't think I had a future. Like I literally was there thinking, there is no way I'm actually going to make it to even the next year. But once I realized that the treatment was beginning to work, it was beginning to kick in. It wasn't that it was 100% at that point, but it was going in the right direction enough for me to think, actually, I do have a future here. Yes, it's worth me learning something new. And I have such a sort of A-type personality that I thought, my God, here, it's going to take me 7 months to undergo this entire treatment. I don't want to waste my time. Like I have to bring something out of this. And my friends are laughing at me going, don't you think that like fighting cancer and recovering from that is enough? And I was like, no, that's not enough. Like, I can't add that to my CV, come on. I need to come out of this with an ICF, International Coaching Federation, coaching certification here. So of course, that's what I set my mind to, and that is what I got. But what it really helped me do was learn about Zoom and connect with so many people all over the world on Zoom, because you have to do 100 hours of coaching to get that certification. And that is a lot of time. And so what did I do? Well, I tapped into my network again, and I said, folks, you guys can have free coaching. I'm learning how to be a coach. Would you be interested in a conversation? And of course, everyone was very generous and said yes. And once I started to get into that, I suddenly began to realize that my actual superpower, which I'd always thought was other things, is my level of intuition. And I really hadn't realized that coaching is all about intuition and connection. Once I realized that magic, that was when I realized I have to be a coach. And so I left my job. I threw myself into coaching full time. But then I realized, you know what? It takes time to grow a coaching practice, but I needed time to recover. So that suited me then. But then I was offered a job with a business that is involved in contract lawyers. So then I was in trying to get lawyers to become contract lawyers, and then to matchmake them with contract roles covering maternity or special projects, etc. So I was able to get back into law doing that. And then I was headhunted for my current position. So I'm currently head of business development for Asia Pacific for a barristers chambers. So having been in legal in a law firm, and then I moved into an alternative legal services provider, and now I'm in a barristers chambers. So this is a chamber for barristers. They are the advocates, because in the UK it's a split profession. You have solicitors who do the work, which is more of the sort of paperwork dealing directly with clients. And then you have the barristers who do the advocacy, either the oral advocacy in courts or the written advocacy as well. And so they work together with solicitors on cases. So that work is really very interesting, and it works perfectly with my coaching. So I work Monday to Thursday for 20 Essex here in Singapore, and then on Fridays I run my coaching and consulting business.
You're such an inspiration, Lara, honestly, to have gone through the personal challenges and the health challenges and yet still want to do more, because for most people going through chemo will just wipe them of all energy. But thank goodness for your energy level. And again, it's all in your attitude. And, it's funny that you were saying that when you started coaching and getting your accreditation through the ICF, that it was everything fell into place, and it was your intuition that makes you a good coach as well. Because it took me back 22 years now to when I first became a coach, and I had always been searching for something, and I enjoyed the roles that I had. But when I was interviewing for this role as a coach, and I was learning more and more about it, because I didn't even know what coaching was initially, but the more I found out about it, the more I realized, this sounds like I've come home. It's a funny feeling. It's like that sudden aha moment that this is what I was born to do. And now, fast forward 22 years, I've been at it for so long now. And yes, getting your certifications, the accreditations are so important. But it's the people that you connect with and the difference that you can make in their lives simply by listening to what's important to them, that you can really tap into their own powers as well and draw that out. I think that's the magic of coaching. And for you, Lara, combining this with the fabulous work that you're doing at 20 Essex, and I need to let our listeners know that you also have another side project, which is beautiful and fun, because there's obviously too many hours in the day for you to fill. So now you've got this amazing, it's called Lara Q Designs, yes? Lara Q Designs. And in your spare time, I don't know where you find it, you create these amazing crafts. So I recommend everyone follows Lara Q Designs on Instagram, as well as check out Lara's LinkedIn profile, because it is very impressive. And Lara, what would you say your number one superpower is? What do you bring to the table?
I think what I bring is an ability to connect with people very, very quickly on a level is, I can just meet someone for one time and they'll remember me, I'll remember them, and we'll have a deep connection. And I have no qualms about ringing them up 30 years later and saying, remember that time, we met at this party, and, and they'll go, oh yeah, remember you, and then we'll just kick it off again as though we've known each other our whole lives. I think that is, that's my superpower, the deep connection. But again,
the power of connections and authentic connection, which is what's so important, isn't it? And I think I'm sure that the people remember you because you do listen, as well as talk, explain your stories so very, very clearly and with such incredible passion and enthusiasm as well. And I'm sure that there'll be another new venture for you coming up as well, that maybe you can also squeeze that in as well. It was such a joy talking to you. Thank you for sharing your story, because it's been fascinating. You've taken us from Spain, through to Hong Kong and Singapore and London and Guildford and through Europe. And it's been an absolutely fascinating journey. And I'm very privileged and so happy to have had you on your career podcast. And I hope actually that we should have you back again, because another time we can talk about, and I was thinking we'd get to it this time, but I've run out of time, unfortunately, but we can talk about what it's like to be a third culture kid and share our Eurasian heritage history. Would you like that?
Absolutely. I think this is such a global world now. Certainly in Singapore, at my children's school, there are just thousands of third culture kids, and it is a very unique perspective. I think also very good for parents of third culture kids to understand from the perspective of an older third culture kid, how they can support their children and what that mindset gives you, the advantages and disadvantages. There are challenges, but at the same time, there are some very unique gifts that we are given because of that experience. And certainly being a third culture kid has really helped me in my life in terms of my outlook, my ability to connect with others, my language acquisition abilities and things like that, and ability to adapt. And I think, in this brave new world that we live in, the number one thing to be able to do is to adapt. We all hear about people pivoting and adapting and all of that, but that is what it is. We are threatened by AI at this very moment. So what can we do to adapt as human beings? That's what makes us so unique. We are able to reimagine ourselves, reinvent ourselves. So anybody who is able to be agile, an agile thinker, an agile learner, lifelong learner, these are the people who will thrive. The new survival of the fittest, Darwin would be intrigued, but the new human, like we need to be human being 3.0. That human being 3.0 is somebody who does have a growth mindset, who is able to learn, is willing, and has the energy to do so.
Yeah, wise words. And I think also having a global mindset and understanding across cultures and what that means. And I think that we're very privileged to be third culture kids and be parents of third culture kids, and now my grandchildren as well. You're too young to get to that stage, but soon.
Hopefully not too
years,
soon.
Yes. That's right. So much to share. Thank you so much, Lara, for your time. And I look forward to this episode going live so that we can share your story to everybody.
Thank you so much for having me, Jane. It's been a pleasure.
joining me today. For affordable career help, please check out my Career Success Program. I provide a unique blend of online and live career coaching to help you take control of every aspect of your career or career change. If you aren't where you want to be in your career, let's talk. Check it out at thecareersacademy.online. The links are in my show notes.